16. Luke chapter 16 is where we're going to be this morning as we begin a new message series in Luke called Jesus, the Ruler of My Personality. How many of you have personality? Yeah, right. We all have personality, of course, and some of us are extroverted, some of us are introverted. Some of us, how many of you have ever taken the Myers-Briggs test? A few of you, okay, if you're in leadership or some kind of role like that. Myers-Briggs Foundation, as you take this assessment, tells you what kind of personality you have, and you can have up to 16 different personality types based on a few different factors, whether you're extroverted or introverted, sensing or intuitive, thinking or feeling, and judging or perceiving and how you think and that kind of thing. And so, while assessments like those can be very beneficial to knowing who we are as a person, Jesus, in these next few chapters that we're going to be going over the next few weeks, Jesus addresses, I think, some deeper personality traits that we should be more aware of. And so we're going to be looking at these deeper personality traits over the next few weeks, and maybe we can look at what we can improve upon. Maybe I can do better at this, or maybe I just need to do this all together and start. And so many of these deeper personalities are not highly thought of in society. We don't really address them, but we'll find that these personality traits are very important if you're a follower of Jesus Christ. They're very important to have if you're a follower of Jesus Christ. So I want to jump in and tell you a story. Maybe you remember this back in 1992. I know that was a long time ago, but back in 1992, a woman named Georgianne Johnson from Cleveland signed up to run in a 10K race. And so she showed up to the starting line to go through her normal routine. And when she got there, she noticed something a little odd. There were over 4,000 people at the starting line of this race. Well, she didn't really think much about it, but it was kind of shocking. She arrived 15 minutes early to the starting line. She began stretching and warming up, and she never really talked to anybody because she was so focused on getting to the starting line and waiting for the gun to go off. When she gets there, the gun goes off. She starts running the race, and as many times as she'd done in the past, she took off, and she's out, and she's doing really well. And about 4 miles into the race, something interesting happened. The runners took a turn that was kind of surprising to her because they started heading out of town. This is 4 miles in. So she was kind of surprised by this, and she asked the man running next to her, "Hey, where are we going?" And he looked back at her like she were the crazy one. This is not good. So she keeps running, but running a few more miles, her lungs began to ache and her legs were hurting, and she realized, oh man, I'm in the wrong race. This is not a 10K. She spotted a police officer. She ran over to the police officer and she said, "Would you take me back into town, please?" And he told her, "I would love to do that, ma'am, but I've got to stay at my post until the race is over. I'm sorry, I can't help you." So now she's not quite sure what to do, and just kind of in a moment of desperation, she decided to get back into the midst of the runners and continue on in this race. And then, of course, fatigue set in. She begins to cry. This is not good. And then she looks up, and the man running in front of her has 3 words written on the back of his t-shirt: "Just do it." Remember that? Just do it. And she thought to herself, you know what? I will. So she continued to run, and this 42-year-old secretary from Cleveland, Ohio, had never run more than 8 consecutive miles. And that day, she completed a 26.2 mile marathon. And get this, she finished 83rd out of the women in in the race. Isn't that amazing? I look at something like this, and in our lives, there will come a time in each of our lives when we will run up against an overwhelming obstacle. We're gonna have something in our lives that's going to be very challenging and very difficult. It could be an intimidating opportunity, and we're going to be forced to make a decision. Are we going to quit? Or are we just going to just do it? That's going to be the challenge. Now, most times the answer to this question is going to come down to this. What do we have a passion for? We see this obstacle come up in our lives. If we're passionate about our family, then you better believe we're going to power through and get through whatever the obstacle is. If we're passionate about sports or being an athlete, then we're going to work out, we're going to train, we're going to do everything we can to be the best competitor we can be. If our passion is our job, like anybody's passion is their job, right? But really, if our passion is our job, I'm very passionate about what I do, we're going to do everything we can to grind it out when we come up against an obstacle. We're going to do everything that we can to power through it and get through it. Why? Because we're passionate about it. So if you look in Luke chapter 16, Jesus tells a parable, a story that talks about intensity. Intensity. And he challenges our thinking. He challenges our thinking in this story. And really it's this. What comes first in your life? Really? What are you really passionate about? Because whatever that is, we will be intense to see it through. We will be intense to fulfill whatever that thing is. And so we're going to look at three characteristics when it comes to intensity that Jesus addresses here in this passage. Let's see how we measure up. In the first parable, Jesus tells this story about a dishonest manager. He's obviously embezzling money from the company, and he's making a pretty good profit, I think, on it. And then the owner of the company calls for this audit. We're going to find out what's going on in our company monetarily. And so the owner of the company is going to do this. The manager realizes, oh man, I'm going to be caught. Sure enough, they're going to find out what I've been doing all these years, and I'm going to get fired. And so he puts his mind to work. There's no way he's going to be able to hide all his shortcomings, what he's been doing wrong. So he puts his mind to work, and he knows, you know what, I can't get another job. There's no way. I can't do what I'm doing now for some other company, because if they find out what I've been doing, they won't hire me. They know I'm a thief. And he can't get some kind of manual labor job. You know, his soft office hands just aren't used to that, so that's out of the question. And he's too proud to go out and beg for money. So he puts his mind to work to save his own skin. He enacts a plan. He calls the owner of a company who owes this company 800 gallons of oil, and he makes them an offer. He tells them, man, if you just bring half of that today, then we'll call it even. I'll just mark it paid in full. All right? So then he calls another company and he says, I'll tell you what, you bring me 800 bushels of grain. I know you owe me 1,000 bushels of grain, but you bring me 800 bushels of grain. We'll call it even. Everything will be okay. Now, this dishonest manager, he, of course, falsifies the records in order to gain the gratitude of these debtors. Why? It makes sense. You know, if he's going to get fired, he might need a place to work. And he's been so kind to erase some of the debt that these companies owe his boss's company that maybe they'll just hire him to come and work for them. And if they don't hire him, now he's got some dirt on him, because he's not going to tell his boss what he's done, right? But he could go to them and say, I'll tell you what, if you don't hire me, I'll just let my boss know that you didn't pay your full amount. Then what? So this guy's pretty wise. He's pretty smart in what he's doing. And then look what happens when the owner of the company learns of this devious plot. Look at verse 8. Verse 8. The master commended the dishonest manager. Why? Because he had acted shrewdly. That's kind of surprising. Now, I think there's something we need to understand from this passage very quickly, though. The manager is not God, okay? The manager does not represent God, obviously. Everybody in this story is kind of looking out for number one here, and some of the parables, it doesn't always relate to God or anything like that, okay? So he's just a character in the story, and each character's motive in this story is greed, right? Money is the ruling force. Some people read this story, they misunderstand the parable as well. They think, well, you know what, I guess Jesus is saying that it's okay to be dishonest at work. No, that's not it, right? I hope you're with me here. Jesus is not saying it's okay to be dishonest at work. We have to look at the entire story. What is Jesus trying to get to us in this parable? The more we dig into it, the more we realize just what Jesus is getting at. Look at the rest of verse 8 now. He says, for the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. Who are the people of the light? You and I, Christians. Wow, that's a pretty scary truth. So then he says in verse 9, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves so that when it is gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Now, Jesus did not approve of the dishonest manager's behavior. Did not approve of that. What's he do? He points out a simple, kind of sad truth about Christian people, about church people. The truth is that the people of the world are much craftier than the people of the light, Christians. That's a sad truth. While the people in the world act wisely, we Christians, from time to time, we can be pretty dense. That's what Jesus is saying. So Jesus challenges our personality here. Here's the application. I want you to write this in your notes. Jesus challenges us to a personality of intense creativity. Intense creativity. This manager was pretty creative in what he did in order to save his own skin and maybe find work outside of this job he currently has. It's pretty creative in what he did. And so we as Christians should act prudently, should act just as prudently with regard to divine things as unbelievers do with regard to earthly things. We should be just as wise and smart as they are. I like William Barclay and the way he summarizes this passage. Here's what he says. Listen to this. He says, this means that if only the Christian, you and I, was as eager and ingenious in his attempt to attain goodness as the man of the world is in his attempt to attain money and comfort, he would be a much better man. If only men would give as much attention to the things which concern their souls as they do to the things which concern their business, they would be much better men. Then he says, over and over again, a man or woman will expend 20 times the amount of time, money, effort on his pleasure, his hobby, his garden, his sport, as he does on his church. 20 times more. Then he says this, I like how he wraps up. He says, our Christianity will begin to feel real and effective only when we spend as much time and effort on it as we do on our worldly activities. What's important to you? I ask this again, what's the purpose of the church, you know? Our purpose is corporately as a church and individually as just single people. Our intention and our purpose is to point people to Jesus and that we would glorify Him with our own lives. That's our purpose. How focused on that are we? We're here to influence others. I love Ephesians chapter 5. If you got your Bibles, turn over there real quick. Ephesians chapter 5. Paul, I think, drives the point home here. One of my favorite passages in the Bible here in verses 15 and 16. He says, this is what it's all about. As a Christian, here you go. Ephesians 5, 15 and 16. He says, be very careful then how you live. Not as unwise, but as wise. Intensive creativity. He says, and make the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. How many opportunities do we allow to just kind of slide on by in our daily lives because we're focused on other things? And we know full well that Jesus needs that one person, and we just kind of walk by. And so I think as Christians, we've got to have this creative intensity to point people to Jesus. We've got to point people to Jesus. And that's why we handed out 1,000 stress balls at the Mumfest last weekend. You know, we're trying to be creative and letting people know, hey, there's a church in town that you're welcome to come and be a part of. You know? That's why we're going to participate in Trunk or Treat here in a few weeks at the end of this month. There's information in your bulletins about it. It's not going to be here. We're going to go down to the middle school and team up with a couple of churches in the area to reach kids for Jesus. We got to be intensely creative in reaching people for Jesus these days. That's why we had the sports camp for the kids in the summer, this past summer. That's why we do neighborhood outreach events from time to time. We're just trying to do something creative that the world will say, oh yeah, you know what, this church may have something going on. We should go check it out. Because we want to point people to Jesus. Now, I don't know how many people you guys still use these. You got these in your pews today, right? Some of you may be sitting on them because you didn't realize it was in your pew, but check around you. And if you need one, there are plenty more, some in the open seats there. But art cards. I've been here just over 4 years now, and I still can't believe I have a lot of these left over. Here's an opportunity to be creative in telling someone about Jesus, inviting them to our church. ARC stands for Act of Random Kindness. So what do? We go out, we do an act of random kindness for somebody. Maybe we just had a neighbor move in down from us. I'm thinking about baking some cookies or something and taking them over. Honey, can you do that? Get on that, make a note. But here's what I do. Bake him some cookies or take something over as a gift, welcome to the neighborhood, and hand him the card. On the card, hey, you know what? We have worship services at 10:30 a.m. You're welcome to come and join us. It's an open invitation. It's an open opportunity for me to, maybe they have questions, and now I can talk with them. All right? Maybe I rake my neighbor's leaves, and when I'm done, I give them a card. Act of random kindness. I don't want payment. I just want you to come to know Jesus. I want you to know that God still loves you. People need to hear that in our world today. They don't think God loves them. They think God hates them. So here's some opportunity. So I encourage you, take one of these home with you today. If you need more, there are more at the information center, or scavenge around in the room and grab some that are in the empty seats. But we're trying to be intensively creative in what we're trying to do to point people to Jesus Christ. Solomon said this in Proverbs chapter 9 and verse 12. Look at that. If you are wise, what? Say it out loud. Your wisdom will reward you. Isn't that great? If you're smart about things in life, you're going to be rewarded because of that. That's how God operates. So be wise. Make the most of every opportunity. Intense creativity. Let's read on. Let's go to verses 10 through 12 in Luke chapter 16. Jesus continues on. He says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. That's great, right? We give our kids responsibility and, a little bit as time goes on, and they're able to do some pretty great things. Then he says, but if you are dishonest with very little, then you will be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? Are you trustworthy? Can people point to you and say, yeah, there's a trustworthy man or there's a trustworthy woman? Do people look up to you for that? I just read the other day, get this, in the U.S. workforce today, 67% of people admit to stealing something from the workplace, either illegally or dishonestly or unethically. 67% of the American workforce. The article I read says it costs the American workforce something like $1 billion a year. They're stealing everything. They're taking it home dishonest. There is no trustworthiness in the United States of America anymore. 67%. Then I ran across this. This is kind of neat. There's a Gallup poll that comes out every year, at the end of the year typically, that ranks the most trusted and reliable professions in the United States. It ranks them in order, the most trusted and reliable professions. For 15 years in a row, guess who's come first? Not clergy. Nope. What did you say, lawyer? Oh, fireman, close. Nurses. Nurses. If you're a nurse, raise your hand. We want to applaud you. Go ahead. Or program, yeah. I mean, that's excellent. There you go, yes. So nurses rank number one, and they have ranked number one for the last 15 years in a row. People love nurses. They trust them. They're reliable. But listen to this, okay? Last year, 2016, the rankings went like this. Somewhere in here, there's got to be clergy, right? Listen to this. Number one, of course, nurses. Number two, pharmacists. Number three, medical doctors. Number four, engineers. Tracy. Tom, where are you, Tom? Engineers. I don't know if anybody else. Oh, yes, Nick up in the balcony. Number four, that's great. Congratulations. Number five, dentists. I don't know if I trust my dentist, man. Number five. Number six, police officers. Number seven, college teachers. Number eight, clergy. Number eight. There's something wrong with that, right? When they first started doing this in the 70s, clergy would kind of go back and forth between number one and two. Clergy have been on this downslide every year since the year 2002. Remember 2002? That was the year of the sex scandal in the Catholic Church and made national news. Ever since then, clergy has slidden down the scale, and right now it's like a 44% of America trust clergy. There's something wrong with that. We're going the wrong direction. What about your profession? I don't know. I could tell you the bottom five, but then you'd probably be ticked off at me. Yeah. So I don't want that to happen. But here's the deal. Here's what I'm trying to say. All of us in this room, no matter what we do, no matter who we are in life, we've got to raise the standard. In our workplaces, in our work fields, we've got to raise the standard in our individual lives. We've got to be better people. People that can count on us. Jesus challenges us, write this in your notes, he challenges us to a personality of intense honesty. Are you honest? Are you trustworthy in things in your life? I was reading a story last week, and several years ago in Southfield, Michigan, a businessman and his secretary went to an office party, and the secretary there, she had too much to drink. There was alcohol. She had too much to drink, and her boss said, "There's no way you're driving home. I'll take you home." So he gave her a ride home, and he drops her off at her house, and then he goes to his house where he's going to pick up his wife because they have dinner reservations that night. And so on the way to his house, he decided, you know what, I don't think I'm going to tell my wife about taking the secretary home. She doesn't need to know. She might think it, maybe it was too much, and she might not understand that it was an innocent gesture. She might take it the wrong way. That's what he decided in his mouth. So keep the mouth shut, and she'll never know. So he gets home, his wife gets in the car, they start driving off toward the restaurant, and about halfway there, he glances down and he sees half a high-heeled shoe sticking out from under her seat. Yikes. He begins to sweat, and he thinks to himself, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? He gets an idea. He looks at something out his wife's window and points, and it gets her attention. So she looks, he swoops down, grabs the shoe, and throws it out the window, his window. She never saw it happen. He thinks, okay, I got away with this, good. They get to the restaurant, and they pull into the parking lot, and they park the car, and he notices his wife's squirming a little bit. She's fidgeting around, and she looks at him, and she says, honey, have you seen my other shoe? Listen, folks, the truth always comes out, right? In the end, the truth will always come out. This is important that we understand this, because if we're honest in the small things, we'll be honest in the big things. This is what Jesus is trying to say. We need to live lives of intense honesty in everything. We need to concentrate on making certain that we are people of integrity. You might put a slash beside that word honesty and put integrity. We need to be who we are because that is who we are as people of integrity. Proverbs 11:3 says, "The integrity of the upright guides them." It's their default. If I'm a man of integrity, then I'm going to let that guide every decision and action I make. But the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. You tell this person a lie, and that person a lie, and that person a lie, and pretty soon you have no idea. You come to a screeching halt. You'll get found out. John Maxwell, a leadership guru, he says, "Integrity is your best friend if you keep your priorities straight." What are your priorities? Little things lead to big things, and if you're honest in little things, then you're going to be honest in big things. If you're dishonest with those little things, you're going to be dishonest with big things. Life will not go well for you. Intense honesty, intense creativity. Jesus next wraps up this section in verses 13 through 15, kind of maybe with a hard teaching for some of us in this room. Look at what he says in verse 13. He says, "No servant can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to that one and despise the other." And he says, you cannot serve both God and money. That's a huge challenge. You can't serve both. It's impossible. So then it goes on, and Luke again kind of summarizes what's happening. The Pharisees who loved money heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. And literally the Greek says they turned their noses up at him as if they were better than he. All right, so they're sneering at Jesus. And then Jesus says this in verse 15. "You are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of men, but God knows your hearts." Isn't that the truth? He knows our hearts. And then he says, "What is highly valued among men is detestable in God's sight." He says you cannot serve two masters. It's impossible. And he's asking, which one is it going to be? Jesus is saying there's no room for casual Christianity. No room. William Barclay, again, he says it this way. He says, "Serving God can never be a part-time or a spare-time job." He says, we either belong to Him totally or not at all. So Jesus challenges us, write this in your notes, to a personality of intense loyalty. Loyalty. How loyal are you to Jesus Christ? How loyal are you to God? DeGarmo and Key. I don't know how many of you remember DeGarmo and Key. They were a Christian band in the 80s and 90s. They used to sing these lyrics. They used to sing, I don't want to be a casual Christian. I don't want to live a lukewarm life because I want to light up the night with an everlasting light. I don't want to live the casual Christian life. I want to be all in. I want to do what's right. This here, right here, this room, this is a place for loyalty. Every one of you in this room, I believe you're here because you are loyal to Jesus Christ. This is a place for loyalty. This is a place for allegiance. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the world today. You can pledge allegiance to the flag or you can stand there and kneel. I don't care. But when it comes to God, I'll stand with my arms high and lifted up. Totally surrendered. This is a place for loyalty. This is a place where you say, you know what, I'm on your team, Lord. I'm on your team and I'm going to play for you. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times we look more like the Pharisees than we care to admit. You know, the Pharisees, we may look like we've got our acts together. We may look like it. We may dress the part. We may put on our suits and dresses and come to church and look like we got our spiritual lives all put together really well. We may look like that, but inside we know we got some stuff going on. And that's called hypocrisy. Like the Pharisees, I think we place more importance on the things we wear, the sports we play, our hobbies, where we travel to, the toys we have, the money we spend, than we do on Jesus Christ. We place more importance on other things in this life, and it takes precedent over Jesus Christ. And you know what we've done? We've just moved God from the center of our lives outside somewhere on the circle, and we've allowed something to take His place. And you know what? God really isn't impressed with that. If you owned cattle on 1,000 hills, if you owned everything you could ever own in all of creation, do you think that impresses the God of the universe? No way. Do you think He's concerned with whether or not your complexion is a little different or you look like a supermodel? Do you think He's concerned with whether or not you can hit a golf ball straight as an arrow? No way. Or do you think He's more concerned with where your soul is and whether or not your heart belongs to Him? That's intense loyalty. I don't want to be a casual Christian. Back in 1990, there was a center fielder named Brett Butler. Brett Butler left the San Francisco Giants to play for the Los Angeles Dodgers, and it made huge news. It was kind of a blow to the Giants fans everywhere. Remember when Jim Thome left Cleveland? What a sad day. It was kind of like that, okay? So he leaves San Francisco. He goes to play for the Giants, and the fans, of course, loved Brett Butler, but now he's with the Dodgers. Early on in the season, the two teams met up to play against each other, Candlestick Park in San Francisco, and it was a big hype. I mean, the media just covered it. They were all over Brett Butler. What's happening? We miss you. We wish you would have never left. And it was just this big thing. And so Brett Butler, of course, was the center of all the attention. So the game is about to begin. Of course, the announcer is going through the lineups for the Los Angeles Dodgers, and when he announces Brett Butler's name, the whole crowd goes crazy. They're going nuts. They love Brett Butler. San Francisco fans are cheering for him. Los Angeles fans are cheering for him, and everybody's just going nuts. Yeah, Brett Butler, woo, It was a great moment. But then Brett Butler did something that the fans caught sight of. He walked across the dugout for the Los Angeles Dodgers and over to his manager, Tommy Lasorda, and he gave him this big bear hug. And wouldn't you know it, all those San Francisco fans that were in that crowd that day, they went from, yeah, all right, to boo, you're terrible, we hate you. Just like that. They turned on him in an instant. When the game was over in the conference room, the reporters asked Brett Butler what everybody was wondering, why did you do that? This is what he said. He said, it turned the page in my career. I'm an LA Dodger now, he said. I'm not a Giant anymore. He said, that kind of solidified it. I wanted them to know I'm a Dodger. Listen, when people become Christians, in one way or another, they need to embrace Jesus Christ in full view of friends and family and co-workers and neighbors and say, I am a Christian now. I'm a Christian now. That's why when somebody gets baptized, if I know about it, I tell them, you need to invite everybody you can, friends, neighbors, family, whatever. Get them here because it's an important part of your life. And you can stand up and say, you know what? I'm a Christian. The world needs to know where you stand. All of us. They need to know where we stand. And they might ridicule us. They might make fun of us. They might unfriend me. Oh. So let them have no question where your mind is and where your loyalty is with Jesus Christ. How's your intensity? I hope it's better today than it was a little while ago. Are you serious about your faith? Are you merely doing your duty? You know what I mean? You kind of show up to church Sunday in and Sunday out, and you go home, and it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, and you don't think about it until you show up again next week. You doing your duty like that, or are you saying, you know what? Jesus is everything to me. I don't want to be a casual Christian. And God doesn't want casual Christians. He wants Christians who are totally loyal and totally sold out for Him. Plain and simple. He wants Christians just like that. There will come a time in your life where you're going to stand up to some kind of major obstacle. It will come, And you're going to have a choice, and that is, which master will you serve? Are you going to serve the world, or are you going to serve Jesus Christ? Where's your loyalty? And today, you've got a chance to make that commitment to Jesus, to join in running the good race. The good race. And I'm telling you, it's not a 100-yard dash. It's not a 10K. This is a marathon, folks. We're stepping up to the starting line of a marathon when it comes to Christianity. And Jesus, here's the cool thing, He promises to be with you every step of the way. So I say to you, just do it. Get out of your pew today. Come forward as I'm standing down here and say, I'm ready. I'm ready to join Jesus Christ. Be baptized and walk in faith with Him. All right? Let's stand together. Let's sing. If that's you today, I'm telling you this morning, just do it. Come on forward as we do.